I watched my husband adjust the blanket over his pregnant mistress like she was spun glass. He checked his watch, annoyed, thinking the only thing standing between him and his new life was my signature on a piece of paper. He had no idea that in 4 minutes, the suitcase currently gliding toward the TSA scanner was going to trade his first-class ticket to Zurich for a pair of federal handcuffs. He thought he had won. He was about to lose everything. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I stood in the dead center of the departure terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. It is a strange place to end a marriage. The air conditioning was blasting, that specific kind of industrial cold that smells like ozone and floor polish, but it didn't even register against the sheet of ice spreading outward from my chest. People were blurring past me like a movie on fast forward. Businessmen in tan coats, families dragging screaming toddlers, backpackers looking at maps. But I was perfectly still. I felt like a ghost, haunting my own life. Facing me, about 10 feet away, was Declan. This was the man who had shared my bed, my taxes, and my oxygen for the last 5 years. He looked at me with eyes that were completely devoid of the warmth I used to see when he looked at me across a pillow. Now, those eyes were just impatient. His hand was gripping the handle of a sleek black designer suitcase, Louis Vuitton, brand new, holding the future he had chosen, a future that had absolutely no room for me. Pressed against his side, practically glued to his ribcage, was Kayla. One of her manicured hands rested protectively on her stomach, which was noticeably swollen beneath an expensive cream-colored silk dress. It was a gesture that seemed both fragile and incredibly possessive. She locked eyes with me for a split second. There was no shame there, no guilt. It was undisguised, radiating the smug confidence of a victor who knows the war is over, and she is the one standing on the pile of rubble. She didn't say a word, but her look screamed it loud and clear. "See that, darling? In the end, the man, the money, and the baby are mine." The sweet, cloying scent of her perfume, something floral and expensive, likely paid for with money from our joint account, drifted over to me, mixing with the airport air to create a nauseating fragrance. In my hand, I held a single sheet of standard printer paper. It was thin, flimsy, but it felt as heavy as a 2,000-pound weight. The divorce agreement. Declan had already filled out every single field in his sharp, jagged handwriting, leaving only a blank line at the bottom for Aisha Vance. In the section for the division of marital assets, he had drawn a long, diagonal line. It was as cold and decisive as the way he was currently erasing my name from his existence. The pen he had shoved into my hand felt like an icicle. "Just sign it, Amelia," Declan said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the ambient noise of the terminal like a knife. "Don't waste everyone's time. The flight starts boarding in 20 minutes. The way he said my name, Amelia, sounded strangely distant, like he was addressing a telemarketer he was trying to hang up on. It wasn't babe or honey or any of the lies he had fed me for half a decade. It was just Amelia, the name of a stranger standing in his way. He spoke of his time, of the plane about to take off, the plane that would carry him and his mistress to a new world to welcome their son. And what about my time? Who was going to compensate me for 5 years of my youth? I looked up and searched deep into his eyes, the eyes of the man who was once my entire solar system. I searched for a flicker of doubt, a shadow of guilt, anything human, but I found only an impatient void. My voice cracked when I finally spoke, sounding almost inaudible even to my own ears. 5 years, Declan. 5 years of my life, reduced to this one simple sheet of paper? My question was lost in the murmur of 1,000 travelers, but I knew he heard me. I saw the muscle in his jaw tense, a small rhythmic pulsing that always signaled his contained anger. "Honey," Kayla coughed discreetly, pulling the attention back to her. It was a subtle psychological strike, reminding him of what he was protecting. She looked at Declan with an expression of false concern. "I'm starting to feel a little tired. Can't we go on ahead? My back is killing me." Declan instantly turned toward her, his posture softening, his voice dropping an octave into that gentle, protective tone I used to think was reserved for me. "Just a little more patience, babe. As soon as this is done, we'll go through to the lounge. You can put your feet up." The contrast in his treatment of us was like a physical blow. For her, his complete attention. For me, only contempt. I knew I had nothing left to lose. They had taken everything, my family, my love, my youth, and the dream of having a child together. But I couldn't let them leave so easily. I couldn't allow him and that woman to start a new life of happiness built upon my suffering. I took a deep breath, gathering my remaining courage. The pen trembled in my hand, but my gaze, fixed on Declan, was no longer pleading. I looked at him, and the woman brazenly clinging to his arm and prepared to deliver the final line of the drama I had designed myself. My mind snapped back to where the cracks in the glass house first started to show. It wasn't at an airport, but in the dining room of the Buckhead mansion Declan had bought 6 months after our wedding. I vividly remember the day I first entered the Vance family dynamic, not just as a girlfriend, but as a wife. The imposing 3-story estate was intimidatingly luxurious, filled with furniture that cost more than my parents' entire house. We were hosting a welcome to the family dinner, orchestrated by my mother-in-law, Grace. Grace sat at the head of the table, slicing into the roast beef I had spent 4 hours preparing. She chewed slowly, her eyes scanning the ceiling as if consulting a panel of invisible judges. The silence in the room was so thick you could choke on it. The only sound was the scraping of silver knives against fine china. "It's interesting," Grace finally said, dabbing the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. She offered me a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You really are brave, Amelia. Most people wouldn't dare to serve a roast this textured. It reminds me of the jerky my father used to chew on hunting trips. Very nostalgic." I felt the heat rise up my neck. I followed the recipe exactly, Grace. The thermometer said it was medium rare. "Oh, I'm sure you did, dear." She waved her hand dismissively. "Appliances can be so tricky if you aren't used to professional-grade equipment. It's not your fault." I looked at Declan, waiting, hoping. He was sitting to my right, scrolling through emails on his phone, his thumb flicking upward in a hypnotic rhythm. "Declan?" I said softly. He didn't look up. "Mom's just giving you pointers, Amelia. Don't be so sensitive. Pass the salt." "Pastor Jenkins' daughter just had her first grandson," Grace continued, not missing a beat. She took a sip of her wine, her eyes locking onto my flat stomach. "You wouldn't believe how plump and handsome he is. 8 pounds, 4 ounces. A real Vance-sized baby if we were so lucky. How long will this house remain so quiet, Declan?" Every one of her words was like a small needle plunging deep into my heart without drawing blood. She knew we had been trying. She knew about the negative tests. Declan finally looked up, but not to defend me. "Mom, please, we're eating." It was a weak, non-committal phrase. He never truly defended me. He never told her, "Mom, stop pressuring Amelia." His silence and evasion were a form of consent, the fertilizer that made my mother-in-law's sharp criticism grow more intense with each passing day. "I'm just saying," Grace smiled, taking another bite of the jerky. "A house this big needs life. Otherwise, what's the point of all this space? It just feels barren." She let the word hang in the air. Barren. She wasn't talking about the house. If Grace was the judge, my sister-in-law, Tara, was the executioner. She was my age, 28, but still completely dependent on the family trust fund. She viewed me not as a sister, but as a free maid and a walk-in closet. 3 weeks after the dinner party, I was upstairs in the master bedroom, trying to organize my closet. Tara barged in without knocking, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yeah, I'll be there in 20. Hold on. She pulled the phone away and looked at me. Hey, I'm going to a gallery opening downtown. I need that silver vintage clutch, the beaded one. I froze. That clutch wasn't just an accessory. It was a gift from my grandmother, one of the few things I had left of her. It was delicate. The beading was hand-stitched, and Tara was notorious for spilling drinks. Tara, I don't think so, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That bag is really old. It's fragile. Last time you borrowed my scarf, it came back with a burn mark. Tara rolled her eyes, talking into her phone again. She's being weird. Hold on. She hung up and crossed her arms. Seriously, it's a bag, Amelia. It's meant to be used. It's sitting on a shelf gathering dust. Don't be selfish. It's not about being selfish. It's sentimental, I insisted. Declan! Tara shouted toward the hallway. Declan, come here. My husband appeared in the doorway a moment later, holding a tablet. What is it? I'm on a call. Amelia won't let me borrow the silver clutch, Tara whined, her voice taking on the pitch of a petulant child. I built my whole outfit around it. She's doing this on purpose because she knows I'm already late. Declan looked at me, exasperated. Amelia, just let her take the bag. Declan, it's my grandmother's, I argued, clutching the bag to my chest. She ruins everything she borrows. He pinched the bridge of his nose. It's just a purse. We can buy you 10 more if something happens to it. Just give it to her so she leaves and I can get back to work. Stop creating drama over nothing. He reached out and gently but firmly pried the bag from my fingers. He handed it to his sister. Tara snatched it with a triumphant smirk. Thanks, big bro, she said, winking at me before turning on her heel. I'll bring it back tomorrow, maybe. Declan walked out without looking at me. Close the door, it's drafty. I stood there, empty-handed, realizing that in this house, my boundaries were non-existent. I was a guest who paid bills but had no rights. I withered in solitude amidst such luxury, counting the days and clinging to the memory of the Declan who had proposed to me on a windy bluff, promising to build a home filled with laughter. That man seemed dead now. One rainy Tuesday, while tidying the spare room, a room Grace constantly referred to as the nursery that never was, I found a heavy cardboard tube tucked behind a dresser. I opened it and unrolled the contents on the floor. They were my old architectural blueprints. Before I married Declan, I was a junior architect with a promising career. This specific set was my passion project, a boutique eco-hotel in the Carolinas. I traced the white lines with my finger, the solarium, the rainwater harvesting system, the cantilevered decks. I remembered the woman who drew this. She was ambitious, she was creative, she was loud. I sat there for an hour just staring at the lines, feeling a phantom limb sensation for the career I had amputated to manage Declan's household. The door creaked open. Declan stood there, loosening his tie. He had come home early for once. What is this mess? He asked, looking at the papers spread over the hardwood. It's my old project, I said, looking up with a spark of excitement. Remember? The Eco Hotel? I was thinking maybe I could pick it up again. Just freelance. I have so much free time during the day and... Declan let out a short, sharp laugh. He walked over and nudged the edge of the blueprint with the toe of his expensive Oxford shoe. Amelia, we talked about this, he said, his tone condescending, like he was explaining gravity to a toddler. You don't need to work. That's why I bust my ass 14 hours a day, so you don't have to stress over deadlines and contractors. I know I don't have to, I said, standing up. I want to. I feel useless, Declan. I just clean and cook and get yelled at by your mother. You're not useless, he said, walking to the door. You're managing the estate. That's a full-time job. Besides, look at these. He gestured vaguely at my masterpiece. It's a nice hobby, but let's be real. You've been out of the game for 5 years. The software has changed. The codes have changed. You'd be embarrassing yourself. He turned back. Clean this up before dinner. Mom is coming over and she hates clutter. He didn't understand, or he deliberately chose not to. It wasn't the past. It was my identity, and he had just kicked it with his shoe. The cracks in the wall were spreading, but the ceiling didn't collapse until a Thursday morning in November. It started with the most mundane task possible: laundry. Declan had returned late the night before from a client dinner, tossing his navy suit on the bedroom chair. I picked it up to take it to the dry cleaner. As I checked the pockets, habit, really, looking for loose change or business cards, my fingers brushed against a piece of paper that had been folded into a tiny, tight square. I pulled it out. It wasn't a receipt for a steak dinner or drinks at the country club. It was a thermal printout from the Buckhead Women's Wellness Center. I frowned. That was the most expensive private clinic in the city, the kind that didn't take insurance and offered concierge service. I unfolded it further. Service: 4D ultrasound and fetal anomaly scan. Date: yesterday. Amount: $2,450. Patient name: Kayla Hayes. The world stopped. Literally stopped. The hum of the washing machine, the birds outside, the blood rushing in my ears. It all went silent. I stared at the name. Kayla Hayes. I knew that name. She was the new marketing consultant Declan had hired 6 months ago, the one who was young and hungry and really turning the department around. I looked at the itemized list again. Fetal anomaly scan. You don't get that scan unless you are far along, unless there is a baby. My knees gave out. I sank onto the plush carpet of the walk-in closet, clutching the jacket that smelled faintly of cedar and vanilla. I sniffed the fabric. It wasn't cedar. It was her perfume. Sweet, heavy, intoxicating. I sat there for an hour, motionless, my mind blank. I tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe he paid for a friend. Maybe it was a loan. But why was the receipt in his pocket? Why did he pay cash? The receipt said cash payment for something so personal. Thousands of questions spun in my head, but all pointed to a single answer I dared not face. I waited for him that night. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I simply sat on the sofa in the living room, the single lamp on, with the receipt placed precisely in the center of the glass coffee table. Declan arrived past 11 at night, stumbling slightly as he came through the door. He smelled heavily of scotch and that same vanilla perfume. He loosened his tie, surprised to see me awake. "Amelia? Why are you sitting in the dark?" he asked, reaching for the light switch. "Don't," I said. My voice was steady, which surprised me. "Look at the table." He squinted, walking over. When his eyes landed on the small, crumpled piece of paper, his face went through a fascinating transformation. Confusion, then recognition, then a flash of pure, unadulterated panic. It lasted maybe half a second before his mask slammed back into place. He picked it up, chuckled darkly, and tossed it into the wastebasket by the fireplace. "You went through my pockets?" he asked, turning the accusation on me immediately. "Classy, Amelia." "Who is Kayla Hayes?" I asked, ignoring his jab. "And why are you paying $2,000 for her ultrasound?" He sighed, rubbing his temples as if I were giving him a migraine. "She's my employee, Amelia. Her husband... Look, it's a tragic story. He's a contractor working in Dubai. His payments got frozen. She had a medical scare, needed this scan urgently, and her insurance denied it. I loaned her the money, cash, so it wouldn't look weird on the company books." "You carry $2,000 in cash?" "I'm a businessman. I carry cash. Look." He pulled out his phone, tapping furiously. He shoved the screen in my face. "Read this." It was an email chain. From Kayla Hayes to Declan Vance. Subject: loan repayment. Text: "Mr. Vance, thank you so much for the help today." I was terrified about the baby. "I promise to pay back the loan as soon as Mark's transfer clears. You're a lifesaver." The timestamp was from yesterday afternoon. "Are you happy now?" Declan sneered, pulling the phone back. I help a desperate woman whose husband is overseas, and I come home to the Spanish Inquisition. You're pathetic, Amelia. Your jealousy is getting out of control. Maybe if you had a job or, I don't know, a life, you wouldn't possessiveness over mine." He grabbed his jacket. "I'm sleeping in the guest room. I can't deal with your crazy tonight." He stormed up the stairs. I sat there looking at the empty space where he had stood. The email looked real. His indignation felt real. But I knew. Deep down, past the gaslighting and the shame he tried to dump on me, I knew. A boss doesn't pay cash for an ultrasound. A boss doesn't smell like his employee's vanilla perfume. And an innocent man doesn't delete the evidence the second he sees it. He thought he had played me. He thought the fake email, probably drafted by him and sent to himself, was a masterstroke. But he had made one mistake. He had underestimated the woman he married. That night, for the first time in 5 years of marriage, we slept with our backs to each other. The king-sized mattress, usually a place where we would drift toward the center, now felt like a vast frozen tundra. I lay on the absolute edge, listening to Declan's breathing. It was rhythmic, heavy, the sleep of a man who believed his own lies. The spacious bedroom felt suffocating. The air was thick with the things we weren't saying. I stared at the blinking red light of the smoke detector on the ceiling, realizing that the first crack in the glass house had opened and no amount of epoxy or forced smiles would ever close it again. The next morning, the dynamic shifted. Declan became the model of a misunderstood, hard-working husband. He didn't bring up the receipt. He didn't apologize. He just acted cautious. He stopped leaving his phone on the counter. He took his calls in the car before coming inside. He was patching the wall, desperately trying to cover the fissure. But I was no longer the Amelia of yesterday. I didn't question him. I didn't ask, "Who was that?" or "When will you be home?" I simply watched. My silence wasn't acceptance. It was data collection. I became a predator lurking in my own hallway. When he went to shower, I didn't make coffee. I went to the garage. I checked the odometer on his Mercedes, 42,810. I wrote it down in a small notepad I kept hidden inside a hollowed-out cookbook in the kitchen. When he came home that evening claiming he had been at the downtown office all day, a 12-mile round trip, I checked again. 42,940. 130 miles. That wasn't a commute. That was a trip to the countryside, or a very distant suburb. I walked into the kitchen where he was pouring himself a glass of water. He looked tired, his tie loosened, a sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Long day?" I asked, chopping carrots with a rhythmic, violent thud, thud, thud. He jumped slightly. "Yeah, brutal. The merger is a nightmare. I was glued to my desk for 10 hours straight." "Glued to your desk?" I repeated, not looking up. "Must be exhausting not moving all day." He narrowed his eyes, sensing the trap but not seeing the mechanism. "It is. Why are you looking at me like that?" "Like what?" I smiled, a tight, thin expression. "I'm just making dinner. Pot roast, your mother's favorite." He put the glass down a little too hard. "You're being weird again, Amelia. Stop obsessing." He walked out. He thought I was just a nagging wife. He didn't know I was building a map of his betrayal, mile by mile. The intuition of a betrayed wife is a terrifying thing. It told me the receipt was just the tip of the iceberg, a small jagged rock hinting at a mountain beneath the surface. I knew something bigger was coming. It arrived 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday. A violent thunderstorm had parked itself over Atlanta. The rain was hammering against the windows like handfuls of gravel, and the thunder shook the floorboards. It was near 1 a.m. I woke up with a dry throat, the kind of thirst that pulls you out of a deep sleep. I slipped out of bed. Declan's side was empty. I walked down the hallway, the carpet dampening my footsteps. As I passed the study, I saw a sliver of yellow light cutting across the dark floor from under the door. I was about to knock, to ask why he was working so late, but a few words stopped me cold. It was Declan's voice. But it wasn't his business voice, that smooth, commanding baritone he used to charm investors. It was high, tight, and edged with genuine terror. "I don't care about the penalties," he shouted, then immediately lowered his voice to a harsh whisper. "Liquidate the bond portfolio. Yes, all of it. I need the cash in the offshore account by Friday." I pressed my back against the cold wall, holding my breath. "Do you not understand English?" Declan hissed. "The doctor said the window is closing. If we don't operate immediately after the birth, the heart defect—" "No, shut up. I don't care if the SEC flags it. This is my son. Get me the money." My body went rigid. A buzzing filled my ears, louder than the thunder. Congenital heart defect. Operation immediately after birth. My son. The puzzle pieces slammed together with the force of a car crash. The business trips to the U.S. weren't just luxury getaways with a mistress. They were a race against time to save a life. It was a truth so cruel and ironic, it almost made me laugh. In a corner of my mind, a strange, sickening compassion arose. An innocent child was sick. A father was desperate. But then the wave of fury hit me. He was liquidating our bonds. He was willing to burn down our financial future, risk prison, and destroy me to save the child he had made with another woman. "It looks like it's not our time yet, Amelia," he had told me 6 months ago when I begged for money for IVF. "We need to be financially prudent. If we wait patiently, it will happen." He had told me we were broke. He had told me to wait. Meanwhile, he was moving mountains and millions for her. I heard the chair scrape against the floor in the study. He was getting up. I turned and ran back to the bedroom, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I dove under the covers just as the door handle turned. I lay in the dark, feigning sleep, while Declan checked on me. I felt his gaze burning into the back of my neck. After a minute, he sighed, a shaky, ragged sound, and went to his side of the bed. The next morning, I lived like a shadow. The pain and the atrocious truth seemed to have absorbed almost all my vital energy. Declan left early, claiming an emergency board meeting. I sat in the living room, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows. The storm had passed, leaving a gray, wet world. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I looked old, not in years, but in spirit. My eyes were dull, my posture slumped. I was a ghost in a house I didn't own, married to a man who didn't see me. A dark thought, slippery and cold, entered my mind. What if I just stopped? There was a bottle of sleeping pills in the bathroom cabinet. It would be so easy to just turn off the noise, to stop wondering where the money went, to stop feeling this humiliation that was eating me from the inside out like acid. I stood up and walked toward the bathroom. My hand hovered over the cabinet handle. Then my phone buzzed on the counter, a notification from my mother. Just a simple picture of her garden in Savannah, a blurry shot of a hydrangea bush she was proud of. "Look at these blooms, honey. Strong roots survive the winter." I stared at the screen. Strong roots. The image of the confident, dream-filled Amelia who had drawn that eco-hotel flashed in my mind. The Amelia who had graduated top of her class. The Amelia who didn't take crap from contractors. I pulled my hand back from the cabinet. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm not going to die for him. That's exactly what he wants. A quiet exit." If I died, he got the sympathy. He got the life insurance. He got to play the grieving widower while raising his secret family on my grave. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard knot of anger. I didn't want to die. I wanted justice. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my mom. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't dialed in 3 years. Miles. Miles had been my best friend in college. A genius in information technology, a guy who lived in hoodies and code. He was the only person who knew the real me before I buried myself in this marriage. I hit call. Amelia? His voice was groggy. It's 10 a.m. You okay? We haven't talked since Christmas. I need help, Miles, I said. My voice didn't crack. It was steel. I need to find out where my husband is hiding his money. We met at a small, cluttered bookstore cafe in Little 5 Points. It was the kind of place Declan would never set foot in. Too many nose rings, not enough valet parking. It smelled of old paper and roasted coffee beans. When Miles walked in, he stopped. He looked at me, really looked at me, and his expression shifted from casual to concerned. I knew I looked terrible. I hadn't worn makeup. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun. I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, not the designer dresses Declan preferred. He pulled up a chair. You look like you've been in a war zone, Mel. I am, I said. I told him everything. I didn't sugarcoat it. I started with the receipt, the smell of vanilla perfume, the tracking of the odometer, and finally, the phone call I had overheard in the storm. Miles listened, tearing a paper napkin into tiny shreds. When I got to the part about the heart operation and the liquidating bonds, he stopped shredding. He's moving serious capital, Miles said, his voice low. If he's liquidating bonds mid-term, he's taking a massive tax hit. That reeks of desperation. He said millions, Miles. He said he didn't care about the SEC. Miles leaned in. Okay, that's specific. If he's worried about the SEC, he's not just withdrawing savings, he's moving company assets. That's embezzlement or laundering. I need to know for sure, I said. I need to know how much he's taken. He handles all the finances. He makes me sign papers without reading them. I'm blind, Miles. You're not blind, you were trusting, Miles corrected me. He opened his laptop, the screen glow illuminating his face. Give me his main email address and your social security number. I can't hack the bank directly. I'm not in a movie. But if your name is on the joint accounts, I can run a trace on the credit reports and see the inquiries. He typed furiously for a few minutes. I drank my black coffee, feeling the caffeine jitter through my veins. Okay, Miles said, frowning. This is weird. What? I'm seeing a lot of activity on a joint savings account with Sun Trust. You have access to that? That's our future fund, I said. We put money in there every month for the house renovations, for the baby. Can you log in? I don't have the app on my phone. Declan said it was safer if only one device had access. Miles turned the laptop toward me. Log in through the browser. Use the forgot password protocol. It'll send a code to your phone if your number is listed. I did it. The code came. I typed it in. The screen loaded. The banking interface was blue and white, cheerful and corporate. My eyes scanned the header. Vance Joint Savings. I looked at the balance. $0.00. I blinked. That couldn't be right. We'd been saving for 5 years. Every bonus, every tax refund. It should have been nearly $200,000. I clicked on Transaction History. One single line item dominated the screen, dated 3 weeks ago. Withdrawal. Wire transfer. Amount. $150,000. Destination. Secure Trust, LLC, Cayman Islands. The numbers danced before my eyes. $150,000. That wasn't just money. That was the trip to Italy we never took. That was the new roof we needed. That was the IVF treatment the doctor had recommended, the one Declan said we couldn't afford right now. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had stolen my future to pay for hers. He took it all, I whispered. My hand started to shake so hard I knocked my spoon onto the floor with a loud clang. Miles, he took everything. The IVF money. He took the baby money. Miles stared at the screen, his jaw tight. That transfer went to a shell company. Cayman Islands means he's trying to wash it. He's not just paying a hospital bill, Mel. He's setting up a nest egg. He's planning to leave. He told me to wait. I said, my voice rising. People were starting to look. I didn't care. He told me we were broke. He told me I was being impatient. He's a thief, Miles said firmly, and he's smart. He moved this just under the reporting threshold for automatic IRS flags by splitting it into smaller chunks before bundling it. See these previous transfers? He pointed to a series of smaller withdrawals. 9,000, 9,000, 9,000. Structuring, Miles said. That's a felony. I looked at the screen, at the empty zero. The grief I had felt earlier, the suicidal sadness, vanished completely. In its place, something cold and hard slammed into my chest. It felt like a vault door closing. He had stolen my ability to be a mother. He had stolen 5 years, and he thought he could just wire transfer me out of his life. I stood up abruptly. I have to go. Amelia, wait. Miles closed his laptop. You can't just go home and scream at him. If he knows you know, he'll hide the rest. He'll cut you off completely. You have $0, remember? I'm not going to scream at him, I said. I walked into the cafe's tiny, graffiti-covered bathroom. I locked the door and gripped the porcelain sink. I looked at myself in the dirty mirror. The woman staring back had bloodshot eyes and pale skin. She looked like a victim. She looked like the kind of woman who signs a divorce paper at an airport and takes a pity check. I splashed cold water on my face. I scrubbed the skin until it was red. I took the hair tie out of my bun and let my hair fall around my face. I straightened my spine. You are not a victim, I told the reflection. You are an architect. You build things, and you demolish them. Declan Vance had built a glass house on a foundation of lies. He thought I was just a piece of furniture inside it. He was about to find out that I was the demolition crew. I dried my face with a rough paper towel. I took out my phone and texted Miles, who was sitting just outside the door. I need a plan. I want to know where the rest of the money is, and I want to burn his world down. I opened the door. Miles was waiting. He looked at me, and he must have seen the change because he didn't ask if I was okay. He just nodded. If we're going to do this, Miles said, we need access to his main ledger. The bank account is just the getaway car. We need the map. His laptop, I said immediately. He never lets it out of his sight. It has a fingerprint lock. Every lock has a key, Miles said, a dark smile touching his lips. Let's go to work. We have a problem, Miles said, tapping his pen against the rim of his coffee mug. We were still in the cafe, huddled in a back booth that smelled of old vinyl and bleach. Tracing the wire transfer tells us where the money went, but it doesn't prove where it came from. If we go to the cops with just a bank statement, Declan claims it was a legitimate business investment that went south. He gets a slap on the wrist for tax evasion, pays a fine, and flies off to Zurich with his mistress. So we need the source, I said. The dirty laundry. Exactly. We need his ledger. Real estate developers who launder money always have 2 sets of books, one for the IRS and one for the reality. He keeps a safe in his study, I said, visualizing the painting of the hunt scene that swung outward on a hidden hinge. It's behind the oil painting of the fox hunt, but it's biometric and keypad. I don't have the code, and I definitely don't have his fingerprint. Safes are messy. Miles shook his head. Drilling takes time and makes noise. But guys like Declan, they're arrogant. They think their digital security is impenetrable. He has a laptop, I said. A sleek gray MacBook. He never lets it out of his sight. He takes it to the bathroom. He takes it to bed. He puts it in his briefcase before he even puts on his shoes. Does he turn it off? No, I realized. He just closes the lid. He says booting up takes too much time. Miles grinned, a sharp, predatory expression that made him look 10 years younger. That's his Achilles heel. If the machine is in sleep mode, the encryption keys are stored in the RAM. We don't need his password. We just need physical access to the USB port for about 5 minutes. 5 minutes? I asked. Miles, he doesn't leave me alone with it for 5 seconds. Then you have to make him, Miles said. Create a distraction. A fire, a flood, or just wait for the one time a human being is vulnerable. The shower, I whispered. He takes 20-minute showers. He uses that expensive exfoliating scrub. Perfect, Miles said. I have a tool in my car. It's a hardware cloner. It mimics a keyboard and a storage device simultaneously. It'll dump the RAM and the hard drive contents. But you have to be precise, Amelia. One mistake, and it bricks the laptop. If that happens, he'll know. We walked out to Miles's car, a battered Honda Civic that was more hard drive casings than upholstery. He popped the trunk and dug through a chaotic mess of cables until he found a small, matte black object. It looked deceptively simple. It resembled a standard USB drive, but slightly thicker, with a small LED light embedded in the casing. "Listen to me carefully," Miles said, pressing it into my palm. It felt cold and light. "This is a vampire. You plug it into the port. A red light will start flashing. That means it's feeding. It's sucking every byte of data off that drive." "Red means working," I repeated, my fingers closing around it. "Do not, and I cannot stress this enough, do not pull it out while the light is red," Miles said, his eyes locking onto mine. "If you interrupt the handshake, it corrupts the file system. The screen will flash blue, the computer will crash, and it will leave a digital footprint that says, 'Unauthorized device.' He will catch you." "Okay," I swallowed hard. "Wait for the green." "When it turns solid green, you have 3 seconds to pull it out. Then you wipe the port with your thumb to remove any dust disturbance, and you get the hell out of there." "What if he comes back in?" "Then you throw it out the window," Miles said without hesitation. "Better he thinks you're snooping than he finds that stick. If he finds that, he knows you're working with pros, and guys who launder millions, they don't just divorce people who know their secrets, Amelia. They bury them." A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the wind. I put the black stick in my jeans pocket. It felt like I was carrying a grenade. Saturday night arrived with a suffocating tension. Declan was in high spirits, humming to himself as he poured a glass of scotch. He had been working all day, probably finalizing the travel plans with Kayla, and now he was relaxing. "I'm going to hop in the shower," he announced, finishing his drink. "We have that brunch with my mother tomorrow. I want to look fresh." "Okay," I said, not looking up from my book. I was pretending to read the same page for the 30th time. "Don't use all the hot water." He chuckled, patted my shoulder condescendingly, and walked into the master suite. I waited. I heard the heavy thud of the bathroom door closing. Then the distinct thwack of the lock turning. He always locked it, a habit from his bachelor days. I counted to 60. Then I heard it. The hiss of the pipes, the roar of the water hitting the tile. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly. I walked into the bedroom. It was empty. The air smelled of his cologne and the stale scent of lies. I scanned the room. There. On the mahogany dresser sitting next to his cufflinks and watch was the laptop. The silver casing glinted under the recessed lighting. It was closed. I crept toward it, my socks sliding silently on the carpet. I glanced at the bathroom door. The steam was already starting to fog up the crack at the bottom. The water was loud. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the black USB stick. My hand was shaking so badly, I almost dropped it. "Steady," I told myself. "You are an architect. You draw straight lines." I approached the laptop. I didn't open the lid. I found the side port. I took a breath, held it, and jammed the stick in. A tiny red light pierced the dim room. Blink, blink, blink. It was pulsing like a heartbeat. I checked my watch. 7:16 p.m. I stood there, frozen, staring at the light. 1 minute passed. The water in the bathroom kept roaring. Blink, blink, 2 minutes. Why was it taking so long? Miles had said 3 to 5 minutes depending on the data volume. Declan had terabytes of ego stored on this thing. 3 minutes. Suddenly, the sound of the water changed. The heavy roar stopped, replaced by the squeak of a handle turning. My heart hammered against my ribs. He wasn't done. He was just turning off the water to shave. Or maybe he forgot a towel. The light was still red. Blink, blink. Damn it, I whispered. Sweat pricked at my hairline. I heard Declan humming again, a cheerful off-key tune. Then the sound of the cabinet opening. He was looking for something. "Amelia?" he called out from inside the bathroom. "Did you move my razor cartridges?" I froze. I couldn't answer. If I answered, he'd know I was right outside the door. "Never mind, found them," he shouted. I looked at the stick, still red. "Come on." I begged the inanimate object. "Come on." I heard the water turn back on, but quieter this time, sink water. He was rinsing his face. He would be out in less than 60 seconds. Panic surged up my throat like bile. I reached out to grab the stick. Better to fail than be caught. I wrapped my fingers around the cold plastic. Just as I applied pressure to pull, the blinking stopped. A solid, unmoving green light stared back at me. I yanked it out. I wiped the port with my thumb, exactly as Miles had instructed. I shoved the stick down the front of my bra, the cold plastic shocking my skin. The bathroom lock clicked. I spun around and threw myself onto the bed, grabbing a pile of laundry I had left there earlier. The door opened. Declan walked out, a towel wrapped around his waist, steam billowing out behind him. He looked at me, surprised. "What are you doing?" he asked, wiping his face with a hand towel. "Just putting away your socks," I said, holding up a pair of black dress socks. "You left them on the floor." He looked at the dresser where the laptop sat. Then he looked at me. For a second, his eyes narrowed. He walked over to the dresser, picked up his watch, and glanced at the computer. It was exactly where he left it. "You're awfully domestic tonight," he said, slipping the watch on. "Thanks." "Just doing my job," I said, my voice flat. I walked out of the room, feeling the sharp edges of the USB stick pressing against my heart. An hour later, I claimed I needed to buy milk and drove straight to Miles's basement apartment. He plugged the stick into an air-gapped computer, one disconnected from the internet. Lines of code cascaded down the screen like a digital waterfall. "Holy mother of..." Miles muttered, his face bathed in the blue light of the monitor. "What is it?" I asked, leaning over his shoulder. "He's not just hiding money, Amelia. He's washing it for someone big. Look at these file names." He pointed to a folder labeled Project Solaris. Inside were hundreds of Excel spreadsheets. "These are phantom contracts," Miles explained, scrolling rapidly. "Consulting fees for companies that don't exist. Construction materials for buildings that were never built. And look at the flow." He pulled up a diagram. Money comes in from the consultant, goes through Declan's shell companies, gets taxed as legitimate income, and then moves to the Cayman account. "Who is the consultant?" "I don't know," Miles said, "but look at the totals." I looked at the bottom right corner of the spreadsheet. Total assets, $12,400,000. I gasped. He has $12 million. "He manages $12 million, Miles corrected. "His cut is probably 10%. That's $1.2 million, plus the $150,000 he stole from you." "That's enough to start a new life anywhere," I said bitterly. "It's enough to buy a small island," Miles said. He turned to me. "We have the evidence. This proves money laundering, tax fraud, and conspiracy. But if we just email this to the FBI, Declan might have time to run. Or worse, the consultant might make him disappear before he can testify. We need to catch him with the evidence," I said. "On him." "Exactly." Miles reached into a drawer and pulled out a sleek black object. It looked like a high-end portable battery pack for a phone. "What is that?" "It's a data tomb," Miles said. "I'm going to upload the most incriminating files onto this drive. But here's the kicker." He tapped the casing. "I'm coating the inside with a trace amount of a specific nitrate compound. It's harmless to humans, completely stable. And it's exactly the chemical signature that airport explosive sniffers are calibrated to detect." Miles smiled grimly. "If this is in his bag when he goes through security, The machine won't just beep. It will scream. It triggers a level 4 containment protocol. They won't just scan his bag. They'll strip search his digital life. I have to get that into his bag, I said, realizing the plan. You have to get it into his carry-on, Miles confirmed. And you have to make sure he doesn't throw it away. 2 days later, the opportunity didn't present itself. Instead, Declan created it. He came home early on a Wednesday. The air in the house felt heavy, like the pressure drop before a tornado. He asked me to sit in the living room. He sat opposite me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, clasping his hands together in a pose that screamed rehearsed sincerity. "Amelia," he started, his voice soft, "we need to talk." I closed the magazine I was pretending to read. "Okay." "A big project has come up," he said, "for the company, in Europe, Zurich, specifically. They need me there to oversee the subsidiary." "Zurich," I repeated. "That sounds far." "It is, and it's going to be a long deployment. Years, maybe." He paused, looking at the floor, then at me. "I think it's time we face reality. You and we haven't been happy for a long time." "I thought we were fine," I lied. He sighed, shaking his head. "We're roommates, Amelia. We're not partners, and I can't ask you to uproot your life to follow me to Europe for a job that consumes me." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. He slid it across the coffee table. "I've had the lawyers draw up the papers," he said. "It's an uncontested divorce. Clean, simple." I opened the envelope. There it was, the diagonal line through the assets. The house, his, the cars, his, the stocks, his, and, he added, pulling out a checkbook. He wrote quickly and tore off a slip of paper. He placed it on top of the divorce decree. "I want to be fair. I know you stopped working to take care of the house." I looked at the check. $30,000. $30,000, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "That's $6,000 a year, $500 a month. That's what I'm worth?" "It's seed money, Amelia," he said, his voice hardening, "to start fresh. Most guys wouldn't give you anything. The prenup was clear about what you bring is what you keep, and you haven't brought in an income in 5 years. He stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. "I'm leaving on Friday morning. I want this signed before I go. Don't make this ugly, Amelia. Take the money, find a nice apartment, start over." He walked toward the stairs, leaving me with the check that felt like a slap in the face. "Declan," I called out. He stopped but didn't turn around. "I'll sign," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of acting and genuine rage. "But not here. I want to say goodbye properly, at the airport." He turned then, a look of annoyance crossing his face. "The airport? Why?" "Closure," I said. "I want to see you off. I want to sign the papers right before you walk through security, so I know it's really over." He rolled his eyes, but I saw the relief. He just wanted it done. "Fine," he said. "Friday, 8 a.m., don't be late." He went upstairs to pack. He had no idea he had just invited his executioner to the gallows. Friday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, but I wasn't getting ready. I was getting into character. I bypassed the silk blouses and tailored slacks that hung in my closet, the armor of Mrs. Declan Vance. Instead, I reached into the back, pulling out a gray cotton dress I hadn't worn in 3 years. It was slightly faded at the seams and hung loose on my frame, making me look smaller, frailer. I washed my face but didn't reach for the concealer. I let the dark circles under my eyes, earned from 3 nights of sleeping in the guest room, stand out in stark relief against my pale skin. I tied my hair back in a low, messy ponytail, pulling a few strands loose to frame my face in chaos. I looked like a woman who had given up. I looked like a tragedy. My phone buzzed on the marble vanity. "Miles, the package is active. Battery level 99%. Remember, once it's in proximity to the scanners, you have about 40 seconds before the passive sensors pick up the chemical trace. Timing is everything. I picked up the black battery pack from the counter. It was heavy, dense with the data that would end my husband's life as he knew it. I slipped it into the deep pocket of my oversized cardigan. It pulled the fabric down, a literal weight on my side. I grabbed my keys and the unsigned divorce papers. I didn't take my purse. I didn't take a coat. I walked out of the house, leaving the front door unlocked. I wouldn't be coming back to this life anyway. The international terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson was a hive of frantic energy. I parked my car in the short-term lot, paying $30 for the privilege of destroying an empire. I walked through the sliding glass doors, the blast of recycled air hitting me instantly. I scanned the crowd, my heart beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. I saw them near the check-in counter for Swiss Air. Declan looked like $1 million, which was ironic, considering that was exactly what he was trying to smuggle out of the country. He was wearing a navy bespoke suit, the kind that didn't wrinkle. He was laughing at something Kayla said, his head thrown back, his teeth white and perfect. Kayla was radiant in a cream maternity dress that cost more than my first car. She was resting a hand on her belly, playing the role of the glowing mother-to-be. They looked unstoppable. They looked like the protagonists of a romantic comedy, heading off to their happily ever after. I was just the extra, the obstacle to be overcome in the first act. I spotted the luggage cart next to them. It was stacked high. 2 massive, hard-shell silver suitcases, brand new Rimowas, and Declan's sleek black leather carry-on sat perched on top. I took a deep breath, forcing my shoulders to slump. I walked toward them, my steps slow and heavy. "Declan!" I called out, my voice thin. He turned. The smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of profound irritation. He checked his Rolex. "You're late," he snapped. "We board in 40 minutes. Do you have the papers?" "I have them," I said, clutching the folder to my chest. I needed to see you." Kayla sighed, loud and theatrical. "Honey, we don't have time for this drama. My feet are swelling." "I know, babe," Declan soothed her, not looking away from me. "Amelia, give me the papers. Now." I didn't hand them over. I took a step closer, invading his personal space. I saw a young woman with bright purple hair standing about 10 feet away, holding her phone up. She looked like she was texting, but the camera lens was pointed directly at us. The ally. Miles had come through. "Declan, please," I said, raising my voice just enough to carry over the din of the terminal. "Can't we talk about this? 5 years? You're leaving me with nothing? $30,000? That doesn't even cover the debt you left on the credit cards." He stiffened. "Lower your voice, Amelia. You're making a scene." "I don't care about a scene," I cried out, letting the tears I had been holding back finally spill over. They were real tears, hot and stinging. "You're abandoning me. You used me to build your image, and now you're throwing me away for her? For a secretary?" He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into the soft flesh. I said, "Shut up. You signed the prenup. You get what you deserve." "I deserve respect," I shouted, pulling my arm back. "I deserve the truth. Tell everyone here how you stole our savings. Tell them about the Cayman accounts." The color drained from his face. Panic flared in his eyes. I had said the magic words. "Cayman accounts." "You crazy bitch," he hissed. He raised his hand. It was a reflex born of fear and arrogance. He wanted to silence me. He wanted to stop the words coming out of my mouth. Crack. The sound of his palm hitting my cheek echoed like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side. The force of the blow knocked me off balance. I stumbled back, my heel catching on the linoleum, and I fell hard onto the cold floor. The terminal went silent. "Oh my God," someone gasped. "Did he just hit her?" A man's voice boomed. Declan froze, his hand still raised, staring at me in horror. He realized too late that he had just broken the first rule of being a white-collar criminal. Don't draw attention. I lay on the floor for a second, my cheek throbbing. The pain was sharp, but the satisfaction was sweeter. "Get up," Declan hissed, reaching down to grab me, trying to drag me to my feet before security noticed. "Get up, Amelia." "You're fine. Don't touch her," a woman shouted from the crowd. In the chaos, Declan turned his head to glare at the onlookers. "It's a private matter. Back off." This was it, the window. As he turned, his leather carry-on bag was sitting on the floor right next to my head, where he had dropped it to grab me. The zipper was partially open. He had probably taken out his passport moments ago. I reached into my cardigan pocket. My hand closed around the heavy black battery pack. I groaned, pretending to struggle to sit up, using the bag for leverage. "Please," I sobbed, "just let me go." With a sleight of hand born of desperation, I slid the battery pack into the side pocket of his carry-on. It slid in, smoothly, disappearing next to his noise-canceling headphones. I pulled my hand back and collapsed onto the floor again, burying my face in my hands. "I'll sign," I wailed. "Just don't hit me again. I'll sign the papers." Declan snatched the folder from where it had fallen. He shoved a pen at me. "Sign it," he growled, his voice shaking. "Sign it and get out of my sight." I scribbled my name on the line, the signature shaky and illegible. He ripped the paper from my hands, stuffed it into his jacket pocket, and grabbed the handle of his carry-on. "Let's go, Kayla," he barked. He grabbed Kayla's elbow and practically dragged her toward the security checkpoint, leaving me sobbing on the floor as the crowd murmured and filmed. I watched his back. I watched the black bag swinging by his side. Tick, tock. I stayed on the floor until they turned the corner toward the TSA pre-check lane. Then I stood up. I wiped my face. I smoothed my dress. The purple-haired girl gave me a subtle nod and disappeared into the crowd. The video would be online in 10 minutes. I walked to the observation deck, a glass-walled corridor that overlooked the security checkpoint. I needed to see this. I saw Declan and Kayla at the front of the line. Declan was agitated, running a hand through his hair, checking his phone. He looked like a man trying to outrun a ghost. He threw his suit jacket into a plastic bin. He took off his shoes. He lifted the black leather carry-on onto the conveyor belt. The bag moved slowly toward the gray tunnel of the X-ray machine. I held my breath. My hands pressed against the cold glass of the observation deck. The bag disappeared inside. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Wah! A siren cut through the air. It wasn't a beep. It was a strident, ear-splitting alarm that sounded like an air raid siren. Red lights began to flash above the checkpoint. The conveyor belt stopped dead. "Code red, lane 4, code red!" A TSA agent screamed into his radio. Declan froze. He looked at the machine, then at the agents. "What?" he mouthed. "What is that?" 3 agents in tactical vests swarmed him instantly. "Sir, step away from the bag. Hands where I can see them. Now." "It's just a laptop," Declan shouted, holding his hands up, looking more confused than scared. "It's a mistake. I have a flight." "Get on the ground," the lead agent barked, pointing a taser at Declan's chest. "On the ground, now." Declan dropped to his knees, his expensive suit trousers hitting the dirty floor. He looked back at Kayla, but she was already backing away, her hands over her mouth. The lead agent approached the machine with a handheld scanner. He ran it over the bag. The device shrieked again. "Positive for nitrates," the agent yelled. "We have a confirmed explosive signature." I couldn't see the interrogation room, but Miles had access to the security feeds thanks to a backdoor exploit he had found months ago. I sat in my car in the parking garage, watching the grainy footage on my phone. Declan was sitting in a metal chair, handcuffed to the table. He was sweating profusely, his tie was gone, his jacket was gone. 2 men in suits, FBI, not TSA, walked in. One of them was holding the black battery pack in a clear evidence bag. "Do you want to explain this, Mr. Vance?" the agent asked, tossing the bag onto the table. "I've never seen that before in my life," Declan shouted. "Someone planted it. My wife, she's crazy. She was at the terminal." "This device," the agent said calmly, ignoring him, "is not a bomb. Our tech guys just plugged it into an isolated sandbox. It's a hard drive." "So? It's a hard drive." Declan laughed hysterically. "Is that a crime? Owning data?" "It is when the drive contains highly encrypted files labeled Project Solaris," the agent said. "And when the encryption key," he tapped a tablet, "automatically unlocks when connected to a secure federal network. It seems someone wanted us to read this very badly." Declan's face went slack. "We've been looking for the consultant for 2 years, Mr. Vance," the agent said, leaning in. "And according to these spreadsheets, you've moved over $12 million for him in the last 18 months, including a transaction this morning to a Swiss numbered account." I want a lawyer," Declan whispered. "You're going to need a lot more than a lawyer," the agent said. "You're going to need a miracle. Because we also found the chat logs, the ones where you discuss liquidating your wife's assets without her consent. That's federal wire fraud on top of the money laundering." The agent stood up. "Booking is down the hall. Welcome to the federal system, Declan." I closed the video feed. I leaned my head back against the headrest of my car seat. It was done. The glass house hadn't just cracked. It had shattered into a million pieces. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The red mark on my cheek was throbbing, turning a vibrant purple. It hurt, but for the first time in 5 years, the pain felt like healing. The chaos at the checkpoint was a whirlpool, and Declan was at the center, shouting about his rights while 3 agents pinned him to the linoleum. But my eyes drifted to the edge of the storm. Kayla stood there, clutching her stomach. Her face wasn't just pale, it was calculating. She watched her lover, her meal ticket, being dragged away like a sack of laundry. Her eyes darted left, then right, assessing the exits. She saw the perimeter officers blocking the walkway. She was trapped. She made a decision in a split second. "My baby!" she screamed, a shrill, piercing sound that cut through the noise of the arrest. "Help! Something is wrong!" She collapsed. It was a perfect, controlled fall, her knees buckling, her hand protecting her bump, landing softly on her hip. "Medical!" an officer shouted. "We have a pregnant female down!" The crowd surged around her. A wheelchair was brought over. 2 paramedics lifted her. As they settled her into the seat amidst the flurry of "give her air" and "check her pulse," I saw it. Her right hand, hidden by the swell of her dress, flicked outward. A tiny silver rectangle, a SIM card, flew from her fingers and landed silently in the dirt of a fake ficus plant pot next to the trash cans. She slumped back, groaning in theatrical pain, as the paramedics wheeled her toward the infirmary, away from the FBI, away from the search. She wasn't a victim. She was an accomplice who had just jettisoned her connection to the crime, and I was the only witness. 3 hours later, I was sitting on a lumpy beige sofa in a studio apartment in Decatur. Miles called it a safe house, but it was really just an Airbnb he had rented under a fake name. It smelled of lemon pledge and stale cigarettes. I had thrown my phone into the Chattahoochee River on the drive over, following Miles's instructions. I was now using a burner, a cheap flip phone that felt like a relic from high school. The television was on, volume low. Breaking news: Solaris Group CEO arrested in airport sting. The screen showed footage of Declan, handcuffed, being shoved into a black SUV. He looked small. He looked pathetic. Then the image changed. It was the video from the purple-haired girl, the slap, the recoil, the look of absolute shock on my face. Viral outrage, wife of disgraced CEO assaulted moments before arrest. "You're a folk hero," Miles said, pacing the small room. He had tape over the laptop camera. "Twitter is calling for his head. The stock price of Solaris dropped 40% in an hour." "I don't feel like a hero," I said, pulling my knees to my chest. "I feel like a target. Kayla is still out there, and she dropped that SIM card for a reason. She was scared of something bigger than the FBI." "We crippled them, Amelia," Miles insisted. We took out the money man. We took out the middleman, I corrected him. Declan was just the wallet. Who fills the wallet? 2 days passed in a blur of anxiety. I didn't leave the apartment. I ate canned soup and watched the shadows lengthen on the wall. On the third evening, a Tuesday, the buzzer rang. I froze. Miles wasn't supposed to come by until tomorrow. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. A delivery guy in a red cap stood there, holding a flat cardboard box. "Pizza delivery," he called out, bored. "I didn't order anything," I shouted through the wood. He looked at a slip of paper. "Apartment 4B for the architect?" My blood ran cold. The architect. That wasn't a name, that was a mocking title. "Leave it," I said, my voice shaking. "Just leave it." He shrugged, dropped the box on the doormat, and walked away. I waited 5 minutes before I unlocked the deadbolt and dragged the box inside. I opened it with a steak knife, half expecting a bomb. It was a cheese pizza, but the cheese had been scraped off the center, leaving just the red sauce exposed in a jagged circle. I lifted the lid. Written on the inside cardboard in black marker was a message. "We know you like it light on the cheese." I dropped the box. It hit the floor with a dull thud. "Light on the cheese?" That was my specific, annoying order, the one I only ever gave to Declan, the one he used to tease me about on our first dates. This wasn't just a threat. It was a message that they knew everything about me, my habits, my past, and my current location. The safe house wasn't safe. I called Miles on the burner. "We have to move. They found me." "Pack your bag," Miles said, the typing of a keyboard furious in the background. "I'm coming." I went to the bedroom to grab my few things. When I came back to the living room, I saw something I had missed in my panic over the pizza. A small black box was sitting on the windowsill. The window was locked, but the latch looked scratched. Someone had picked it. I walked over, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I opened the box. Inside, resting on a bed of black velvet, was a single red rose. But it wasn't fresh. It had been dipped in liquid nitrogen and shattered. It lay in frozen red shards. Underneath the petals was a business card. It was blank except for a phone number and a time. Tomorrow, noon, Centennial Park. My phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. "The consultant wants to talk. If you don't show, the next thing we shatter won't be a flower." I stared at the shattered petals. They wanted a meeting. They wanted to negotiate, or they wanted to silence me in a public place where a sniper could do the job cleanly. "It's a trap," Miles said, looking at the card. We were in his car, driving aimlessly to avoid being tracked. "You go to the park, you die." "If I don't go, I die anyway," I said, watching the streetlights blur past. "They found the safe house in 2 days, Miles. I can't live looking over my shoulder forever." "So what? You confront the cartel?" "No," I said. "I find the other loose end." "Kayla? She's scared. She dumped that SIM card because it linked her to them. If they are threatening me, they are definitely threatening her. She knows who the consultant is." I used Miles's laptop to log into Declan's old cloud account, the one we cracked. I found the recovery email for Kayla's work address. I sent a single message. "Light on the cheese. They found me. They are coming for you next. Meet me at the Waffle House on Piedmont. Now." It was a gamble. But 20 minutes later, she walked in. She looked wrecked. The maternity glamour was gone. She wore sweatpants and a hoodie, her eyes puffy and red. She slid into the booth opposite me. She didn't order anything. "You ruined my life," she whispered. There was no venom in it, just exhaustion. "I saved your life," I said sharply. "Declan is in a federal cell. Where do you think you'd be right now if he was still free? On a plane to Zurich? Or at the bottom of a lake because you knew too much?" She flinched. "The consultant. He called me. He said my baby isn't safe." "Who is he, Kayla?" She looked around the diner, terrified. "His name is Vance. No relation. Julian Vance. He's the lawyer. But the guy behind him, the magnate, It's Richard Sterling. I gasped. Richard Sterling was a philanthropist. He ran the biggest children's hospital charity in the state. Sterling launders money through the charity, Kayla said rapidly, her voice low. Project Solaris was the construction arm. They build hospitals that cost triple the market rate and pocket the difference. We need proof, I said. Real proof, not just spreadsheets. I have recordings, Kayla said. She pulled a tiny voice recorder from her bra. I didn't trust Declan. I recorded our meetings with Sterling. I have him on tape ordering the liquidation of your assets. I have him threatening a senator. Why didn't you give this to the FBI? Because I want immunity, she said. And money. I have a baby coming. I need out. Okay, I said. We use the meeting tomorrow. We turn the trap around. We didn't go to the park. We sent a counteroffer. We have the recordings. We want $5 million and safe passage. Meet us at the old textile factory in Cabbagetown, tonight. It was a bold move, forcing them to a location we chose. Miles rigged the factory with cameras and microphones. We tipped off the FBI agent who arrested Declan, giving him the recordings as a teaser. At midnight, the factory was a tomb of rusted steel in moonlight. I stood in the center of the floor holding a briefcase. Kayla was hidden in the shadows. A black sedan rolled in. 2 men got out. One was tall, wearing a suit that cost more than the building, the consultant, and behind him, Richard Sterling, the philanthropist. Mrs. Vance, Sterling smiled, his voice like oiled gravel. You are a persistent irritation. I want the money, I said, holding up the briefcase. There is no money, Sterling sighed, checking his cufflinks. Did you really think you could blackmail me? I own the judges in this town. I own the police. Not the feds, I said. Sterling laughed. The FBI is a slow, clumsy beast. By the time they build a case, I'll be having lunch in non-extradition airspace. Is that a confession? I asked. It's a statement of fact, Sterling said. He signaled the consultant. Killer. Make it look like a robbery. The consultant reached into his jacket. A gun. A silencer. Now! I screamed. Screech. Floodlights blinded us from the catwalks above. Federal agents, drop the weapon! Sterling looked up, squinting into the light. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. It's a setup, the consultant hissed, raising his gun toward me. I dove behind a concrete pillar. Pop, pop. 2 bullets chipped the concrete inches from my face. Then a thunderous boom echoed. The SWAT team breached the doors. Down! Down! I curled into a ball, covering my ears as chaos erupted. Flashbangs went off. Men shouted. It lasted 30 seconds, but it felt like hours. When the dust settled, Sterling was on his knees, handcuffed. The consultant was bleeding from the shoulder. Kayla stepped out of the shadows. She walked up to Sterling, who was glaring at her. You should have let me go, she said simply. She handed the voice recorder to the lead agent. Here's the rest, every bribe, every threat. I stood up, dusting off my gray dress. I looked at the wreckage of the organization that had tried to crush me. I walked past Sterling. I didn't say a word. He wasn't worth a speech. Noi update, 3 months later. The trial was the media event of the decade. Richard Sterling's charity empire crumbled faster than a sandcastle in a tsunami. Declan took a plea deal, 15 years in exchange for testifying against Sterling. He sent me a letter from prison. I burned it without reading it. I got the house back in the settlement. I sold it immediately. I didn't want the ghosts. I bought a small penthouse downtown with a balcony where I grow real roses, the kind that don't wilt in boxes. My architectural firm, Vance and Associates, is fully booked for the next 2 years. I specialize in eco-renovations, rebuilding broken things into something sustainable. Yesterday, I received a package from an address in Canada. No name. Just a cashier's check for $150,000 and a note. The operation was a success. He has his father's eyes, but hopefully not his heart. Thank you for forcing me to save myself. K. I held the check. It was the money Declan had stolen. The money for the baby I never had. I didn't cash it. I drove to the children's hospital, the one Sterling hadn't managed to corrupt, and endowed a scholarship for congenital heart defect research. I stood outside the hospital, the wind whipping my hair. I took a deep breath. The air didn't smell like ozone or perfume or fear. It smelled like rain. It smelled like a clean slate. I walked to my car, got in, and drove forward. I didn't check the rearview mirror once. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.